Well, I can't say the dust has settled on Pitt's big news yesterday about the firing of Heather Lyke as director of athletics. But I can at least say that I think we've all sort of settled in and come to terms with the news. Not come to terms like in grief, but just we've all sort of accepted it. We understand it. I'm sure we've all spent a lot of time thinking about it. And certainly we spent a lot of time yesterday talking about it. Did a special live or emergency live stream is what I called it. An emergency live stream yesterday morning after the news about Heather Lyke. And that was fun. That was interesting. I had a lot of people tune in for a live, like I say, an emergency live stream. It almost makes me wonder if I should do the Morning Pitt live every morning. I mean, would you guys tune in those kind of numbers? Could I get 400 or 500 people tuned in for a live Morning Pitt every day of the week, Monday through Friday? Probably not. And we're not going to try it and find out. And quite frankly, schedules are too volatile and, in flux to actually plan something like that. And nevertheless, we did that emergency live stream yesterday, talked a lot about why Heather Lyke was fired, what it means for Pitt, and kind of just sort of the general state of the athletic department. So we covered a lot of that yesterday. And quite frankly, covered a lot of things about Pitt's athletic department and Heather Lyke 2 weeks ago when she was interviewing for the Northwestern job. We spent a lot of time talking about it that week as well. And I think covered a lot of those issues. We covered a lot of those issues on the live stream, the weekly live show on Wednesday night. And then also here on the Morning Pitt. And so, I don't know if we need to rehash that again. Like this morning, I don't think we need to talk about why Heather Lyke got fired. Like if you still aren't sure what went wrong in the Heather Lyke era or tenure, if you're still looking at it and saying, you know what, I think Heather Lyke was a great AD or D of A, as it were. Okay. I would suggest that you check out the live stream from yesterday or maybe the episode we did a couple weeks ago, just for a little more insight on maybe what was going on inside the athletic department over the last 7 years. But either way, it doesn't matter. It's in the past, and you can learn from the past, and you should learn from the past. And there's things that we should take away from Heather Lyke's dismissal and her tenure at Pitt. But ultimately, this is now about looking toward the future because new Pitt Chancellor Joan Gable, who's been here for about a year, has the task of hiring a new athletic director. And that could take some time. I haven't gone back to look and see how long this search or that search took. I mentioned on the live stream yesterday, in 2007, when Jeff Long went to Arkansas, he left during the football season. I feel like it was relatively early, maybe September, maybe early October at the latest. And Steve Peterson was announced on September 1st. So that was, a couple months. It took a couple months in that instance, maybe a little less than a couple months, maybe a little bit more. But it took about a couple months. So, I mean, this kind of hire can take some time. Joan Gable might already have some candidates. She should have some candidates in mind. And she might have, might even, have pre-existing relationships with some people that she might look to bring in as hires. So this might move quick, it might move slow. It doesn't matter. We'll see what comes as time moves on. But in the meantime, let's talk about what Pitt needs. Okay, what does Pitt need out of its athletic director? What are the biggest challenges facing Pitt athletics? And what needs to be fixed the most about Pitt athletics? And without making this a referendum on Heather Lyke, I think we can talk about some of these topics in terms of what Pitt needs from its new AD. What does the new AD need to be able to do? What are the new AD's biggest tasks and biggest challenges going to be? That's what we need to dig into, or that's what we're going to dig into and dive into today before we get back to the, exclusively football talk. Let's talk about what Pitt needs from its new AD hire here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it's the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. Of course, make sure you do all the things that we always ask you to do. The call to action going out right now. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, so you never miss any of our Pitt video content. We have daily Morning Pitt videos coming out like this one every day of the week, Monday through Friday. We have our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night, right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That'll be tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. Jim Hammett and I will get together to talk about Heather Lyke's dismissal, the Backyard Brawl, the Cincinnati game, all those topics that you want to talk about. So tune in for that. Those are always fun. And of course, the best thing we do all week, my favorite thing that we do all week, the post-game show. We'll have a live post-game show after the West Virginia game on Saturday. Guessing we will probably start that thing around 9 or 10 o'clock. I hope. Hopefully that game doesn't go too late. I forgot. I thought it was a noon game. I forgot that it's a 3:30 game. And so this one will be a little bit later, that we'll get started, but we'll do it. We'll have a live show, and we'll talk for an hour and a half, 2 hours, however long it takes before I get tired of it or you get tired of it or we're all just ready to hang it up. But we'll be live after the game for the post-game show. Those are always fun. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And, hopefully you can tune in for it if you want to make sure you don't miss it. And I mentioned this yesterday. We did a live stream kind of out of nowhere. We did an emergency live stream. That happens sometimes. Sometimes there's news that just sort of merits doing a live stream, off schedule, so to speak, just kind of out of nowhere. And when we do that, I'll tweet about it. I'll post it on the message boards. You might not know, though. You might not see the tweet or see the post. So if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, you turn on notifications, you'll get an alert sent to your phone whenever we go live. And so you'll be like, oh, Panther-Lair is going live right now. I got to tune in. So subscribe, turn on notifications. That way you won't miss any of our live streams. All right, what's the key? What's the key to a good... what's the key for Pitt's next athletic director hire? What do they need to get right? What does this hire need to be? I think you have to start with an understanding that the position of an athletic director, the role of an athletic director, the job of an athletic director has changed. It's not what it was 20 years ago. It's really not what it was 10 years ago. Certainly not what it was 30 years ago. The landscape of college athletics has changed. If you compare... This is 2024, right? 20 years ago was 2004. So we had the BCS at least, right? We had the BCS, but you still, and we had some conference realignment. I mean, you had Boston College and Virginia Tech and Miami bolting from the Big East to go to the ACC. And so you had a little bit of conference realignment. You had a little bit of sort of the capitalization of the national championship. But then you dive into the last decade, the 2010s, and you really see all of it start to escalate. You see the college football playoff comes into existence. Conference realignment gets really, really crazy. Obviously, locally, Pitt and Syracuse going to the ACC, West Virginia going to the Big 12. Ultimately, Cincinnati would join as well, and UCF. And then you have the extreme silliness that would follow of the Big Ten rating, the Pac-12 or Pac-10 or whatever they were at that point, getting Oregon and USC and UCLA and Washington, Texas and Oklahoma making the jump to the SEC. I mean, and those things happened in the last 4 years, but you really see over the last 15 years just the seismic change. And then, of course, the most seismic of changes really kind of came about 3 years ago when NIL became a thing, when players, student athletes had name, image, and likeness rights, and they could capitalize on their own names and images and likenesses. And, I mean, that was really what opened the floodgates and led us to this point now of revenue sharing, of the changes in scholarship limits and roster limits, as well as the further legalization of NIL as a pay-to-play and pay-for-play system. And we can all, I don't mean to be defeatist about it. We can all try to get on a moral high horse about this and stand our ground and say it's just not right. College student athletes who are the basically the backbone, the full thrust of this billion-dollar industry should not be paid. I mean, we could say all that, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you morally object to student athletes getting paid. It doesn't matter if you morally object to NIL. It doesn't matter if you morally object to revenue sharing. It doesn't matter. You can yell into the wind about how it's all wrong and it shouldn't be part of sport, but it doesn't matter. It's here. It is part of sports. You can either do it or don't. As a school, you can participate or not, but those who don't participate, those who don't want to have anything to do with it, those who stay out of it are going to be left behind. And so the sooner the schools accept it, and the sooner the fans accept it, and the sooner everybody else involved with this accepts it, the sooner they can move on. Now, vast majority, entirety of college sports, particularly college football, the college football industry has accepted this and understand that this is what it is, and this is the direction it's going, and this is where it's headed. As such, Pitt's new athletic director needs to be fully committed on the NIL front. And that means doing every single thing possible to generate as much money possible for NIL. As much possible. Whatever the school can generate and get into the hands of the people who can pay the NIL money, until we come to a point where the schools themselves can handle these NIL things and pay the student athletes NIL money themselves. But for now, you don't have a system like that, but the schools can get money to NIL through different ways. And Pitt's new athletic director has to understand that, has to embrace that, has to push it forward, has to be a strong proponent of it. There's nothing to be gained by being that lone voice in the wilderness, that voice in the desert saying, no, this is wrong, wrong, wrong. We should not pay these kids. They should have to earn their money. Pay for play is wrong. Like, good for you. History will record your objection, and it'll also record your losses because your teams aren't going to win if you don't pay. The money has to be there. The money has to be right. And I said this on the live stream yesterday. Like, Pitt doesn't get to the NCAA tournament 2 years ago without NIL. Pitt doesn't get on the bubble last year without NIL. Okay? Whatever success the football team achieves this year will be done at least in part due to NIL. Okay? This is part of it. And so the new athletic director has to not only understand that and accept it, but embrace it. And have concrete ideas on how to push it forward, how to drive it and make it work even more for the Pitt football team and the Pitt men's basketball team in that order of priority. The athletic director, the new athletic director, also has to have a pretty clear understanding that football is driving the bus. And I said this countless times yesterday, and I feel like I don't want to be cold about it. I don't want to be cynical about it. But there is a simple reality in college sports. And it's been this way for a long time. Maybe it's always been this way. But it's stark now. You have to support football. Football has to win. And efforts, energy, resources have to go to football. And I don't want to be disrespectful to the student athletes and the coaches at the other programs at Pitt and across the country because they work their tails off. They work harder at what they do than I probably ever have at anything I've done in my life. I mean, they do. It is their life. They are dedicating their lives to these sports, and they should get as much support as possible. But the reality is where that ceiling is of as much support as possible only starts where all the support for football ends. Football has to get everything it needs and everything it wants. Because failing to support football to the utmost is going to lead to failures within the program. And failures within the program are going to drop revenue. Because that's the revenue producing, that's the cash cow. And that's where the money comes from, and that's where it's going to continue coming from. And more money will be coming from football. So you need to put money into it. Like, I was on the Fan yesterday with Joe Starkey and Bob Pompiani, and Bob said something like, well, you got to spend money to make money, talking about like an on-campus stadium. And like, yeah, you do, but not that much money. But you do need to invest money in the program. The resources have to go there, and the new athletic director has to understand that. And like, that doesn't mean you completely ignore Olympic sports. You can't do that. But your number one focus has to be on football. And I apologize. Pitt has 18 other Division I sports. Maybe you don't count men's basketball. So they have 17 other Division I sports. I apologize to the coaches and student athletes of every one of those programs. But football is football. And now more than ever, that point can't be emphasized enough. It's probably why I keep repeating it. So, new athletic director has to embrace NIL, has to understand the value of football, and inherently understand the value of football and act accordingly. And then the new athletic director has to have a clear vision for how to approach revenue sharing. And this is where I think, all of these elements we're talking about, particularly like NIL management and revenue sharing, really lend themselves to the idea that you need someone who is not the traditional athletic director. It's not an athletic director, the type of athletic director you might have hired 20 years ago, because the job is different now, because the tasks are different. The demands and the requirements of the job are different now than they were 2 decades ago. Today's athletic director needs to be a CEO or a CFO, needs to have a business acumen, needs to be something of a general manager even. Needs to understand how to operate an NIL budget, and needs to understand and have a concrete idea of how they're going to find $20 to $22 million in revenue sharing that they can distribute to the student athletes. Because you're going to have to do that. You have to. It's not a requirement unless you want to be competitive. And distributing the revenue sharing, the $20 to $22 million, it's not going to guarantee that you make the playoffs. But failing to do so, or distributing less than the max, might very well guarantee that you don't make the playoffs. You have to do it. If you are going to claim yourself as a legitimate big-time FBS college football program, power conference college football program, then you have to get on board with all of these things. And so the new athletic director, when he or she sits down with Joan Gable, like, they need to have a plan and say, all right, here's how we're going to pay for this. Here's how we're going to approach it. Here's what we're going to do. I've looked at your athletic department, and this is going to have to go, and that's going to have to go, and this department's going to have to go, and that department's going to have to go. And there are going to be cuts, and it's going to be difficult. To some extent, maybe Joan Gable needs to hire a hatchet man who could come in and slash the things that need to be slashed in order to pay for the things that need to be paid for. And I understand, everything I'm saying here is it feels like it almost runs counter to the idea of what college sports is and should be. I get that. Believe me, that is not lost on me at all. But the reality is what college sports is now runs counter to what college sports has always been and maybe should be. So as the game and the industry have adapted and changed, so too have the demands and requirements for an athletic director changed. And so the new AD, whoever he or she may be, is going to have to show that they can adapt to that. And then they're also, and this is not unimportant as well. When coaches get hired, I think they have to have some idea of laying out what their staff is going to look like. They might not have all the names down, but a general idea of what kind of coaching staff they will put together. Pitt's new athletic director, when he or she is hired by Joan Gable, needs to have a concrete idea of what their executive staff will look like. Now, if they're smart, they'll keep a few key members of Pitt's staff on board. You can probably guess which people I would be talking about. But on the whole, this new athletic director is going to have to bring in a new executive team. I'm not sure how many of Heather Lyke's people will survive through this. There may be something close to a near wholesale change at the top. The new AD is going to have to not just be prepared to hire a new executive team, but also be able to give a clear and concise idea of what kind of team they will hire, what the people in their department will look like. And I don't mean look like. That's not the right way to put it at all. But the skill sets, the backgrounds, the experience areas, the expertise. That's the word I'm looking for. Because they need to hire people who they're not just experienced athletic administrators, but the people know how to run businesses, general managers, that kind of experience. And because that's what this job is now. Between the NIL budget, the revenue sharing, I feel like this job is more business-based than it has ever been. And this next athletic director hire needs to reflect that. That's what Joan Gable needs to be looking for, is a business person. Now, maybe she'll go out and hire somebody who's just been in athletics their whole life, which is okay, because I think there are plenty of people with athletics experience who have that kind of knowledge and acumen. But whether they come from athletics or from outside the world of athletics, they need to be someone with that kind of knowledge base, that kind of working experience, someone whose brain works that way. And that's maybe the most important thing. It can't be a traditional athletic director hire. And if it is, it's got to be someone who's got that kind of background. Because that's maybe the most important thing. Everything that happens in the athletic department is going to be supported by the money raised by football. Okay? And that's been true for a while. It's going to be even more so true in the coming years, whether directly through ticket revenue and conference money, or through the donations that climb when football succeeds. Okay? And men's basketball too, to a certain extent. It was what's put to me that the Peterson Sports Complex, the baseball and softball and soccer fields and all that, they were built largely on the back of donations that were made when Pitt basketball was at its peak in the mid 2000s. The fundraising that was done in those years when basketball was really succeeding was ultimately where the money came from for the Peterson Sports Complex. You pour all your resources into football for football to succeed. And if football succeeds, that'll be the rising tide that lifts the rest of the athletic department. The new AD needs to understand that. And if it comes at the expense of other sports, I'm really sorry about that. But that's what college athletics is right now. And that's where it's headed. And it's not turning around, and it's not changing. There's no way to undo the changes that have been done. Pitt's new AD needs to understand that, embrace it, and show a pretty damn good knowledge of how to work in it. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. Tomorrow, we're going to get back to talking football. We've got 3 more Morning Pits this week. We've got Wednesday, Thursday, and then the Morning Pit mailbag on Friday. We've got the live show tomorrow night. Those things are all going to be about football. Well, maybe the mailbag, there'll be some questions about how they're like or something like that. But tomorrow's Morning Pit, tomorrow night's live stream, Thursday's Morning Pit, all football, all the time to get you ready for the backyard brawl. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you are too. Saturday ended very, very well for Pitt. We'll see what this coming Saturday brings, and we'll be breaking it down for you as much as we possibly can over the next 3 days. So a little bit of AD talk today, and then we'll get back into the pigskin tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining today, though. I appreciate it. Thanks to everybody who tuned in for the live stream yesterday. If you missed it, it's right here on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel, and then go check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll catch up with you tomorrow morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.